I think we're live. Yes, we appear to be live anyway. I hope we're live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Library of Mythical Ireland here in Drogheda in the Valley in Ireland. Hope you're all keeping safe and well. Tonight, we are on episode 7 of Book Talk. Yes, we're talking books. There's enough of them on the shelf there to do over 800 episodes of Book Talk. Just in case you thought we were running out of things to say. Before I start, I still haven't remembered the word. And I'm beginning to doubt myself now. I think humus is the closest thing that comes to it. And having strolled through, searched, with great effort through a lot of thesaurus sites and word matching sites on the internet, I still can't find the word. And I'm now doubting that I ever heard it in the first place. So there you go. Just in case you thought we were going to solve that mystery. Anyway, good evening to everybody. Hope you're all safe and well. Before we start, I'll say a few hellos. Archaeoastronomy Database is the first one in the house on YouTube. Good evening to you. Pagan Tree is in there too. Daisy Peters thinks this is a wonderful topic, and she says hello to my dearest Tua de Mythflix. Hey, Archaeoastronomy Database, glad to see you always here with us. Deborah Williams says, hi everyone, slightly early, but hope everyone's doing well. Better early than late. Yeah, so lots of people on there. Well, lots of conversation, certainly, which is brilliant. Stephen Walker says, hello, everyone. Is it hummus or humus? I don't look. The head's fried after that episode. I think my own foliage has fallen off the tree and is rotting in my brain. Deborah Williams, oh my God, I had finally forgotten about the word. Not now. It'll come back to me someday in a week's time, and then I'll have to do a special broadcast all about it. Anne Sieben says, greetings from sunny Denver. Good evening to you, Anne. You're welcome along. Marie Lendon, whose name I'm trying to remember the correct pronunciation of, says, Fulcha. Hello, Marie. You're the first one in the house on Facebook. Barbara Barney says, hi, Anthony, and hi, everyone. Paula Snow Queen has the usual waving hand. Nick S. Casterton says, good evening, Anthony, and all the lovely Tua. Yana Holichka says, hello from the Czech Republic. Hello, Yana. Very welcome. You're very welcome along. Trononowa. Diana Prey Wakeman says, hello from South Carolina. Good evening to you, Diana. Welcome along. Veronica Casey says, hey, Anthony, and Tua Fulcha. Vicky Southall is in the house, says, hello, my lovely friends. Hello, Vicky. And if Evan and Chili are watching, hello to you too. Stacey Herman Lawrence says, hi, Anthony. Ohio, USA. Welcome, Ohio, into the house. Good evening. Vicky says, we're driving, so can't chat much, but we love you. Well, take it easy and be safe. Absolutely. Ria Uleri is in the house. Hello. Anne McCallum is here, says, hello, Anthony and fellow book lovers. Hope all is well with you. Here in Southwest Ontario, we're enjoying unseasonably warm, sunny days while we can, because colder days will be here before the week is over. Well, enjoy them while they last, definitely. Darren Egan wants to know, is Burnass Tom on tonight? I'm looking for a guided tour of Ireland. And Scott Doherty says, greetings, everyone. Excited for today's topic. Yeah, be a nice introduction. Well, we've had, of course, discussions about medieval Ireland, but I think you'll enjoy this one. Amy Wallace Dolan says, hello, everyone. Fulcha, Amy. Nick Eska Casterton, safe journey, Vicky. Pamela Walter says, Giagiv from the Netherlands. In my Irish 102 course, there was an item on Brunabonia this morning. Brilliant stuff. Hope it was accurate. Mariana Dunn says, greetings all. Sláinte, Mariana. Michelle Rhodes says, hi from Sheffield, Anthony. Fulcha Isjach. Michelle, grab yourself a chair. Make yourself a brew. Or even if you want, a dram. Marie said, I said it right. Yes. Adina Sparks says, hello, Anthony and all. Fulcha, Adina. Kristen Gray Taggart says, hello from Davis, California, to Anthony and the lovely Tua. Fulcha, Kristen, great to see you. Robin Rickman says, good afternoon from I thought you said West Pennsylvania, a wet Pennsylvania. I wanted to pop in and say hi. We homeschool, so I may not be able to stick around unless you're going to cover some maths today, lol. You wouldn't want me giving maths exercises, I can tell you that for nothing. ArchDB is in the house, hello. Barbara Kling says, hello from rainy Vermont. Happy to catch the love today. The love? Hey, there's love as well. Neil Hughes says Trenonoa from Coatbridge, Scotland. Another visit to Antone's Lowerlin. Magic. Tay, August, Fiam, Pord. Neil and Mary at the ready. Good stuff. I'm going to have to start, I'm going to have to start sipping a glass of wine. Liam O'Boyle says, why do you think Atlantis is Ireland? Is that for me? That's a discussion, actually, that would make a very good episode of Live Irish Myths. I'm not at all convinced. I'm not at all convinced that Atlantis ever existed, to be honest. But there you go. Amy says, loving the Aran sweater. Isn't it great? Yeah. Yeah, that's just genuine stuff, too. Patricia McAteer is in the house and waving. Hello, Patricia. Michael Naylor. Mike and Jeanette in Jersey. Hello, Anthony and all the tribe. Don't think I've seen you in a little bit, Mike and Jeanette. Hope you're keeping well, but you're very welcome along. Marie Cronin says, hello from cold, wet Clonakilty. Not the way I remember it, Marie, but in fairness, we would have been down there in the summertime. Actually, no. A couple of times myself and my filmmaker friend Martin O'Donoghue were down there in the wintertime filming a special film about Terence Meaden's work, which still hasn't been put together yet, but it's in the offing. Mark Gordon says, good day, Fulcha Mark. Catherine Woodruff is in the house. Hello, Catherine. Good evening, Anthony. Loving the Tommy Makem jumper, says Darren Egan. Well, don't expect me to sing like Tommy Makem. Carol Flavin says, me too. Well, nearby. And says, hello, everyone. Alwyn Roy Badzek is in the house from a blustery Berkshire. Hope having a nip of slow gin. Send some over in the post, will you? Enjoy that. Peggy Thomas is in snowy northern Idaho in the US. Wow, snow. Have you read the book on Lindisfarne by Magnus Magnusson? Oswald Spengler wants to know. I have not. So that's one I have to... I don't have it. And Oswald is in Oregon in the USA. Hello and good evening to you. Sylvia Sanchez says, hello, folks. Good evening. Trenonoa. Conasatatu. Sandy McNabb says, good evening and all. Good evening, all. Coffee in one. Very nice. Enjoy your coffee. Did I miss anyone else? I don't think so. And geez, a whole load more on Facebook. Hi from snowy northern Idaho, US, says Peggy Thomas. Is that not? No, I did read that one, didn't I? What was the next one? Sorry. Susan Mullen Lacerna is in the house from Raleigh, North Carolina. Hello to you. Shaylin Kiley says hello again from Michigan. Hello, Shaylin. Samantha Healy saying hello from the Mourns. A good evening to all too. I love the jumper, Anthony. Well, thank you. I'm not sure whether all of these comments are entirely sincere, but anyway, it's keeping me warm. It's a very practical item of clothing. Tanya Wells says blessings and abundance from Maine, USA. Lived in Ireland for 4 years. Wow. Well, good evening to Maine, or good afternoon. Regina Riley says hello all. Hello, Regina. Veronica Casey is looking for a rendition of Val Dunican's Donkey. Anthony, you're going to have to sing. It's my birthday on Friday, and I want it sang in the Monty Python style, says Paula Snow Queen. Yeah, no. Greetings from Holland, says Kaylee During. I hope you're well, Anthony. Sending you good vibes. Hope everyone has a great Wednesday. All in good form anyway, by the looks of it. Siobhan Farugia says, hi from rainy New York. Seems to be a theme in the eastern states anyway. Snowy further west and north. It takes me 2 hours to get to Jack Lynch Tunnel and another 2 hours to get past Clonakilty, says Darren. I know the feeling. We did it on one bank holiday Monday morning. We set out really early in the morning and we actually got to Clonakilty in 3.5 hours. But the next time we did it through rush hour traffic and it took us 4.5 to 5 hours. So there you go. Patsy O'Malley Boyd says, hi, everyone. Hello to you, Patricia. Kaylee says, this will be the last time that I say hi to you as a 28-year-old. Look, I'm a little bit older than that, Kaylee, but, thank you for the compliment. Oh, you're talking about yourself. Oh, I see. Never mind. Michael Naylor says, been taking a break from Facebook during the election and watching on YouTube. I can understand that. We've been trying to avoid politics because it's very divisive. Sally Siggins says, evening from Sligo, jumper suits you. Is it real Aaron? Yes, except for it doesn't have the big collar on it. It was bought from an Irish manufacturer and merchant. Brendan Byrne says, my slow gin is now blood red. Well, if it tastes all right, should be good. Rosalind wanted to say to everyone so that she can get out of her math. Homeschooling in early medieval Ireland could be done as a, the topic could be covered as a special project for school, surely. Make some excuse, Thanks to Mom, Charlotte Louise, says Siobhan, for introducing me to Mythical Ireland. Well, thank you, Charlotte Louise. Thank you, Mom, for introducing her. Yes, absolutely. Brilliant. It's so nice you say my name correctly. No one in the USA gets it. I have to guess half the time, and I suppose I'm lucky. Shaylin, yes, thank you. Edina is wishing a wonderful birthday to Kaylee. Janet Cassidy, how's it pronounced? Jim Conway's in the house, says Ardwacha Abu. Conasatatu, Jim. You're welcome. Right, let's get started, will we? Louise Sherrill is in the house, says hi. What are we on? We are on, some of you are on the gin, some of you are on the wine, some of you are on the tea. We are on, let's call it 11 minutes 30 for the introductions. Tonight's topic, William Fitzgerald says, brandy punch with maple syrup is pure magic. Sounds nice. Tom King's in the house. Evening, Anthony the Mighty Two. Hope one and all in good form. All good on this side. Yes, definitely. Putting Christmas decorations up tonight, says Dave Hanna, listening to the live stream. Evening all and a happy Christmas. Hey, we're still in Samhain mode here, Yeah, I could say it's a bit early for Christmas, but given the year that it's been, I can't blame people for wanting to celebrate early, to be honest with you, So tonight's subject is not drinks, although lots of people are talking about what they're drinking, perhaps encouraged by me because I keep mentioning what people are drinking. I hope it's tea for everyone, tea or coffee, or a glass of water. In my case, it's a glass of water. Tonight's topic is early medieval Ireland. And so just to put you in the picture, Matthew Stout provides us with the dates on the cover of his book. 431 to 1169. Sorry, I apologize for the yawn. This is the book that we're going to be talking about tonight, Early Medieval Ireland, 431 to 1169 by Matthew Stout. Now, first things first. I want to, full disclosure, I know the author, Matthew Stout. At the very, very least, he could be described as an acquaintance of mine. But I would absolutely count him among my friends. Matthew lectures in Irish history at St. Patrick's in Dublin. His wife is Geraldine Stout. She's an archaeologist. They both have excavated several sites in the Boyne Valley area. I have participated in some of their exhibitions, in some of their excavations, and I have flown my drone over there's a couple of their excavations to take pictures for them. Geraldine performed the launch with David Moore of Astronomy Ireland in 2006 of my first book, Island of the Setting Sun. And they have been regular attenders at my book launches. So, full disclosure, I know the author and I know him very well. The book was published in 2017. I think I might have said 2018 in the blurb earlier on Facebook. Anyway, there are several reasons that if you're interested in Irish mythology, there are several reasons that you cannot avoid becoming interested in some way in medieval history, in the medieval history of Ireland. Okay, so the first and most obvious and most important reason is that a lot of our surviving mythology was written down, as we know, because we've been saying it ad nauseum here on our Live Irish Myth series for the past 6 months or 8 months. that the first and obvious reason is that a great deal of the surviving written mythology was written down by ecclesiastical scribes, medieval monks, basically in the monasteries of Ireland. During this period, during the start of this period and later, towards the end of this period and later, but a lot of those myths were the written versions were based on earlier written versions from the first millennium AD. An insight we are given into kingship, and this is the one of the other sort of very important reasons for studying medieval Ireland. Kingship, provinces, interprovincial competition between kings, rivalry between kings, and what I described earlier in the blurb as internecine warfare. At one point, it gets very, very hot and heavy. The period is notable. First of all, it begins with the introduction of Christianity into Ireland, and that is where we define basically the end of the Iron Age and the beginning of what used to be called the early Christian period, but perhaps for the reasons of political correctness is now more commonly referred to as the early medieval period. Later on, as the monasteries become established, later on the period is marked by the arrival of the Vikings, who become a significant force. And this is one of the things that I think Stout deals with very well. By the way, there are lots and lots of books about medieval Ireland and medieval Irish history, lots of them. And we will probably talk about more of those. We won't just focus on Matthew Stout's book, but tonight we're focusing on Stout's book. Towards the end of the early medieval period, we have then very rapid change. And the reason the period ends in 1169 is because that is the year when the Anglo-Normans arrive, Strongbow, etc., etc. And history changes course very dramatically in the ensuing years, decades, and centuries. But just before that happens, and still within the purview of this period of early medieval Irish history, we have very, very major church reform in the 12th century, most notably in the Synod of Kells, which I think was 1148, commonly referred to as the Synod of Kells and Malafont, in which the church became much more controlled by bishops and less controlled by the older Columban monasteries, and where you had the likes of the Cistercians and the don't do this, Anthony. Don't forget the word now. The Cistercians and the Benedictines, isn't it? The big monastery builders, and you have Malafont being established in the 1140s, etc., etc. Anyway, it's a turbulent period, very, very turbulent period, which I think Matthew Stout deals with very well. I'll read a little bit from the preface before we dip in and out and point out. So this is a little bit of a book review as well. Point out many reasons that this book is very, very helpful in terms of disseminating and deconstructing and unraveling that very complex period of history for us quite successfully. But for a non-specialist audience, I mean, this book can be read by specialists, but is actually aimed at the popular market, which is brilliant. Patricia says that Malafont Abbey is well worth a visit. Absolutely it is, yes indeed. Early medieval Ireland is one of the phases of Irish history that most attracts international attention, as Ireland looms large in European history in the period after the fall of the Roman Empire. Where is it? Malafont Abbey is actually very close to me here. not sure if it's within my 5-kilometre limit, but it's just outside the town of Drogheda by about 3 or 4 miles towards the village of Cullen. Actually, just beyond the village of Tullyallen. Possessing the oldest written vernacular outside the classics, richly documented in both the written and the archaeological record, and with the allure of the Celtic attached to it, Ireland shines bright as a golden era in the Dark Ages. Hello, Evan and Chile. I see you waving. Hello. Thank you for joining us. Ireland shines bright as a golden era in the Dark Ages. And of course, we said this. What episode was it? Was it the first? No, it wasn't episode 1, but it was episode 2 or 3 of Book Talk when we talked about the book by Thomas Cahill, How the Irish Saved Civilization. Yes, indeed, episode 2 of Book Talk. And here we go, basically repeating that contention that is widely repeated by medieval scholars. Ireland shines bright as a golden era in the Dark Ages, intriguing students and scholars all over the world. This book provides an entry-level narrative to this period in Irish history. At the same time, it contextualizes the artistic, literary, and architectural achievements of the age. My motivation for this was not dissatisfaction with the books available on the subject, but rather a sense that none of the key texts covered early medieval Irish history in a manner accessible to my third-level students. Wow. The tradition in early medieval Irish studies has been to examine the past in thematic rather than chronological terms. The sources almost demand this. My students needed a book that was stronger on chronology. Other treatments of the period closely reflect the methodological and disciplinary interests of the authors. Say that after a few glasses of wine. As such, existing publications neglect a holistic approach in favor of specific themes. Politics is rarely incorporated with church history. Art and archaeology remain distinct. Law and literature remain uncontextualized in either time or place. Lastly, I wanted a book that would include extracts from primary sources and illustrations that would make this golden age glow for its readers. So, my greatest pleasure in writing this book has been reading the annals and other primary sources. I can say, yes, these are the data on which the conclusion has been based. And this process has also led to some fresh conclusions. It is my sincere hope that the reader will never feel too far removed from the primary sources that speak to us across those distant centuries. To this end, the website Celt has been indispensable through this research. Yes, I absolutely must share that link. If somebody also, one of the community members can share the live stream on the Mythical Ireland community, that would be great. Okay, and there's quite a lot of acknowledgements in there as well. So one of the reasons that Matthew Stout's book is extremely helpful with regards to unraveling the complications of this period is that every section has a map. So the first section is the origins of early medieval Ireland, circa 800 BC to circa AD 300. So putting in the foundations of what was to come by talking about the Iron Age, etc., etc. And so this is extremely helpful because it gives you the names, the early names of the provinces, the way they were divided, and it gives you. So you'll see the northern Inale and the southern Inale, the O'Neills, of course, were one of the big ruling families of the early medieval period. You'll see some of the rivers in there. The River Boyne is there. Some of the monuments And some of the important places, Newgrange, Tara, Cashel, for instance, Crochan or Rathcroghan in Connacht, Awanmaca in the north, etc. So there's an introduction in every section and then the detail. Now, one of the brilliant achievements of this book, and this is something we could all do with, I think, and something that we could, I think, definitely would aid us in doing these live Irish myths and book talk streams, is there is in the margin, every time there's an Irish place name or family name or personal name, there is, basically an Irish word, there is a phonetic English pronunciation of it. So when you see the very first Irish place name mentioned in the book is Auchlia, which is the Irish name for Dublin, and I think we've discussed that in episodes of Live Irish Myths. And in the margin, Auchlia, AHKLEE-AH, excuse me. And then, you know, he talks about when the island was divided into two larger halves, or two larger provinces, which were called Lee Moga and Lee Cuin. That's an interesting one. I would have said Le, and I think I've pronounced that way before. Le Moga and Le Cuin, which are the Leth, akin to the modern Irish word la, lahur teresh hucht, 8:30, la or le meaning half, Mog's half and Cun's half. Mog and Cun were regarded as the kings of their respective territories and the ancestors of powerful dynasties, first recorded in the contemporary records of the 6th century. The boundary between north and south is marked by a line of east-west running glacial ridges or eskers that have formed a routeway between the coasts since prehistory. Isn't that fantastic that they used a natural boundary? Ireland was further subdivided into fifths or colcaige, literally a fifth part, and we discussed that in relation to Ishnach being the fifth part. In the southeast was Lion, and he gives the provinces, etc., etc. So that is one of the, we've already discussed actually two of the outstandingly brilliant features. Matthew Stout is quite a cartographer. The maps are brilliant. So when you're reading the text, you can go back to the map and try to ascertain where the various kingdoms are and where he's talking about. And then these phonetic pronunciations in the margins of all the Irish words, and you'll see them there running down the margins of every spread, which is just fantastic. In addition to the section map, I'm going to take the dust cover off just to make it easier for me to handle the book for the moment. I regularly do that with books. I find them very difficult to handle sometimes when they have the dust cover on, the dust jacket. In addition to the main maps at the beginning of the sections, of course, there are other maps which help Iron Age Ireland. The widespread distribution of Latin artifacts and sites in Ireland. There you go. So if you want a map of that, it's in Stout's book. And then these panels where, and we do this in the newspaper industry too, and you know, in the publishing industry in general, in magazines, it's done much less in scholarly books and done much more in sort of popular books and encyclopedias. Sort of Dorling, Kindersley do this sort of thing very well. They pull out a panel and give you a sort of a brief synopsis of a subject without going too hot and heavy into it. In this case, that's about radiocarbon dating. On the next page, there's a section about pollen analysis and its importance in archaeology. Some wonderful photography in there too, not forgetting there's a beautiful aerial photograph of the Hill of Tara. And so we really begin the period with early Christianity, circa 300 to AD 560. And again, we have a map of the extant provinces of the time and the leading clans, mostly the Inales, the Crutney, the O'Briens in the west, Austria, Lion, which is Leinster, etc., etc. And so, I mean, this is brilliant. Look, there's a table of people mentioned in chapter 2, right? And Bridget is among them, founder of Kildare, gives you the dates. But again, the pronunciations are there, which I think is brilliant. Another thing that Stout is brilliant at, and I presume, well, I know that Matthew collaborates with Geraldine on Geraldine's publications, and they're always brilliantly illustrated. So here you go. Here is pollen diagrams from various late Iron Age sites. I mean, if the statistics and the empirical facts of archaeology interest you, well, there they are in a very, very easy to see visual, form. Early churches, which is really, really interesting. A map of the early churches in this period. So those founded prior to AD 600, those mentioned as being founded between 6 and 700, and those with Daunach in their name, which means basilic. So, for instance, if you just look at the region of the country where I am, so the early churches are Monasterbois, Slane, Duleek. Dowlig actually is the Irish for Duleek, so called because it is apparently the oldest stone church in Ireland. Old stone, I think Dowlig means. And it was said to have been founded by St. Cianan, who I think was a companion of Patrick when they arrived into Ireland. So everything changes with the arrival of Christianity. But that's not the only thing happening in the first part of the early medieval period. We have early conflict. So already by the 5th and 6th centuries, the various rival factions and families and familial dynastic rulers of the various kingdoms are going to war against each other and engaging in all sorts of violence and slaughter. Now, just in terms of the annals, and we've done episodes of Live Irish Myths on the annals. The annals from this period forward are considered an accurate historic record of events. When you go into pre-Christian and prehistoric times, less so. The annals talk about the date of the arrival of the Milesians, etc., etc. But just look at this, right? Just look at this, and this is one of the genius aspects of this book. And I think it makes it outstanding, actually. The following is a map of the battles, or battles that took place between 432 and 562, a period of 130 years, according to the Annals of Ulster. Look at this. So the battles and the movements. Look how complex that is. Look. So Meath, or Meath, the precursor, this is one of the large territories, the one in which the kingdom of Brea or Bregia was located, and where all the great monuments of Brunabonia are located. You can see that there's an incredible amount of movement out of Meath into other areas and provinces and battles. Unbelievable. So a lot of these battles are given names. So, for instance, I'll just pick out a couple. The Battle of Tolucia in 494 AD. The Battle of Locher Moor in 535. Take note, Paul Gowron, if you're watching, that Locher Moor appears to coincide with Locher Alva. And of course, we did an episode about that in Live Irish Myths. So, when you're reading this and you're reading about the battles, it's very difficult to follow. And it's one of the reasons that medieval Irish history is, as I say, difficult to disentangle, because it is a complex web of families and kings, rulers, and Tua kingdoms or tribes and provinces, and all the time constant incursions, excursions, slaughter, maiming, a brutal affair in many regards, and kind of difficult to keep on top of. If you read the annals, for instance, you'll be left after a while scratching your head. So hang on, which king was this now? Which tribe is this? The are going where? And so having it in map form. And I apologize for the fact that this is mirrored for the Facebook viewers. I do apologize for that. I can't mirror the selfie cam on the Huawei phone. And then we have St. Patrick's Confessio, a translation of it. The Irish in Europe is chapter 3. The Irish in Europe and at home, 560 to 615. Later, less than a century after a man from Britain, who's St. Patrick, spread Christianity throughout Ireland, the Irish clergy returned to Britain and Europe to revive the faith and to bring their own particular brand of worship to the continent. The two greatest representatives of that zeal for religious exile were Columkill and Columbanus. Their lives and the early 7th century literature that narrated them, and I see Paul Gowan giving the thumbs up, show that a remarkable academic infrastructure was firmly established by the year 550. Columkill founded an Irish monastery off the coast of Scotland at Iona. Columbanus founded monasteries further afield in Europe. Their faith, erudition, and confidence in Irish-style Christianity are manifested in early manuscripts. Columbanus's rule survives. From it, we learn about life within an Irish monastery. Strict discipline in all things was a monk's goal, and should he falter, the unique Irish concept of penance kept him tightly bound to the church. In Ireland, meanwhile, early poets wrote in Irish, not in Latin. Sustaining that ecclesiastical flowering was the upsurge in agricultural activity first noted in AD 300. Agrarian growth continued apace, and by 550 these farmers began to build ring forts. Defended farmsteads suited to an economy dominated by the rearing of cattle. Farming communities were organized into small kingdoms. The most significant political event within this period is the first mention of the Ubrian or the O'Briens of Connacht, who later monopolized the kingship of that western province. And so the places mentioned in chapter 3 are given in another of these full-page maps. Fantastic stuff. And then there's again a table of people mentioned in the chapter, etc., etc. There we go. Here's a panel that's called The Saving of Civilization, harking back to episode 2 of Book Talk, which was 4 weeks ago, How the Irish Saved Civilization by Thomas Cahill. It has been suggested that the Irish saved civilization. A new, largely illiterate and often pagan Europe emerged from the ruins of the fall of the Roman Empire, partly owing to the impact of the Irish Church. Certainly by the end of the 5th century, the state of learning was at a low ebb, and in the 6th century, Gregory of Tours wrote, "While the Christian faith was in general devoutly cherished, among some it was growing cold. The churches also were enriched by the faithful or plundered by traitors. And no grammarian skilled in the dialectic art could be found to describe these matters either in prose or verse, and many were lamenting and saying, 'Woe to our day, since the pursuit of letters has perished from among us, and no one can be found among the people who can set forth the deeds of the present on the written page.'" Now, I just want to, just for a moment, just bring you forward into modern times. In the era of conspiracy theories and social media and websites, where people can go and basically find their own truth about things. And we have a total lack of knowledge of true facts and history, etc., etc. We have not a total lack, but among a certain group. We could nearly write the same lament today about the lack of learning, proper learning, and the spread of disinformation. But we're not going to go political, and we're certainly not going to mention the US election. It's not happening. I just can't deal with it. Mariana Dunkindia is working, so can't stay. We'll have to watch another time. Hello to you, Marianne. Thank you for dropping in. In contrast, the Irish Church was fully established by the 6th century, while learning and book production were some of the most revered activities in the early Irish monastery. Just to give you a flavour of how what we've been doing here for the past 6 or 8 months is just continuing a very, very long-running, well-established tradition. This learning was introduced throughout Europe via the 50 or so Irish monasteries known collectively as the Schottenkloster. I think, is that a German word? Schottenkloster. Presumably the second part, kloster, relates to cloisters, something to do with monasteries. The Irish brought their books with them as they travelled through Europe, and this is why some of the finest Irish manuscripts are now preserved in continental libraries. I can't accentuate enough the importance of books as an alternative to alternative fact websites, which are a dime a dozen these days. So great was the reputation of the Irish abroad that there is one account of an Irish pilgrim coming back from Rome having to apologise for not being either a grammarian or one learned in Latin. Half of the biblical commentaries written between 650 and 850 were by Irishmen. Without the Irish, Greek and Hebrew writings would have survived, but they would not have been readily available to influence medieval European thought. The Irish helped to preserve Latin learning, and their vibrant vernacular literature also inspired the national libraries that were to emerge in medieval Europe. So in other words, this is a period of time when, yes, the church is a big influence, but this is not the church as it exists today. You can't conflate the two, and don't compare apples with oranges. But this is a time when the old bardic and druidic traditions hadn't yet given way, and a lot of monks in the early monasteries were in fact probably druids and bards. They wore two hats. What was it I called it? Their heterodoxy was our boon. But they're also having an influence in Europe. And basically, yes, in summary, Cahill is not mistaken when he contends. He's not, like, there are arguments about various aspects of Cahill's book, but broadly speaking, yes, it can be said that saving civilization is perhaps, a little bit, what would you call it, bombastic, or a little bit of an exaggeration, but certainly a lot of the knowledge coming out of Ireland did help to prevent, I think, a total catastrophe in terms of learning, sacred learning. Linda Moore says, yes, Schottenkloster, German for Scottish monasteries. There you go, cloisters. So in the years 615 to 695, chapter 4 is called Ecclesiastical Conformity and Political Orthodoxy. And of course, this is the period when we have the Synod of Whitby, because the Irish Church was kind of doing its own thing and wasn't really listening in relation to the Roman model of things. I discussed this first in Island of the Setting Sun, which is, as you know, just been republished. I can't remember the exact details, but the Irish were calculating Easter a different way to those on the continent. And I think the Synod of Whitby, which I think was 668, if I'm not mistaken, but we'll come to that in a moment, was basically a way for the continental, I'd say Roman, but the Roman Empire had collapsed by then, of course. But the Roman model, and of course the papal involvement in the whole thing, were basically trying to whip the Irish into shape and get them to fall into line with what was happening with their colleagues over the water. But until the Synod of Whitby, the Irish Church is often, the early Irish Church is often described as, the religion is often described as Celtic or Irish insular Christianity, Elaine Dent Lingenfelter is late. That's okay. There's no problem. I was watching Colin Harney. That's all right. Yes, and Janet says probably Scotty, an old word for the Irish. I said this to a group of friends recently, a group of friends in the music circles. I said, do you know that, Scotland is basically named after the Irish? And they were like, oh, go on out of that. And I explained that Scotty or Scoty was an early name for the Irish, and that they migrated across from what's now Northern Ireland into Scotland and settled there. And that's how Scotland gets its name. So again, just reading the summary, because I don't intend to read massive tracts of this. I'm trying to summarize each chapter and give you the introduction, because there are more. Well, it's not that there are more exciting chapters. I consider the whole Viking period to be very important, and there's something very stark about that period too that we'll mention in relation to mythology. At the start of the 7th century, the decisive battle of Myroth, Magroth, featured 8 different armies, and restored the high kingship for 400 years to members of the Northern Inail in northwest Ireland, or the Southern Inail of Meath. They were the ones who ruled in what is now Meath and Northern Leinster. While rival dynasties waged war, while rival dynasties waged war, ecclesiastical sites in the main progressed economically by focusing on tillage. The first known tidal mill in the world was constructed beside the monastery of Nendrum. Janet makes an interesting point that they had to give up the Irish tonsure too. The tonsure was the haircut from ear to ear, so they had to have the hair shaved beneath that line, but above it, isn't it? Yeah, or is it the opposite? I think it's they had to shave beneath that, and the hair was on top, wasn't it? Yes. Janet says that Whitby brought about the end of the Irish tonsure as well. Water mills enhanced the ecclesiastical capacity to pursue a tillage economy, and this specialization is apparent both in the archaeological record and in contemporary sources. Actually, as it happens this year, with social distancing, Matthew Stout and his wife Geraldine Stout continued their excavations at the site of a Cistercian grain exporting I couldn't really, I don't know if you could call it a monastery as such, and it had nothing to do with the nearby Malafont Abbey. Apparently it was completely independent. But what they did was they grew the grain, and they dried it in their kilns there, and they brought it down to the Boyne and loaded it onto boats and shipped it across to the Mother Abbey in France. Fantastic stuff. The early, so if you want to learn more about that excavation, it's I think it's Bobeck Excavations. There's a blog, a brilliant blog by the Stouts. The early 7th century church was riven by the Easter controversy. Papal involvement led to a synod in which the southern portion of Ireland recognized Roman Orthodoxy. In 665, a plague struck Ireland but did not make a profound impact on its population or economy. So, folks, as we know from dealing with the annals, the episodes of Live Irish Myths that we did about the annals, plagues and epidemics are not at all a new thing. In the second half of the 7th century, the issue of who would claim control of the Irish Church came to a head. The assertions in favour of Kildare sponsored the earliest known saint's life. Ultimately, Armagh copper-fastened its primacy through a propaganda campaign that produced the earliest life of St. Patrick. Like high kingship, this elevated ecclesiastical status had little practical significance at the time. In the closing years of the 7th century, the high kingship was firmly in the possession of Finn Shechtne of Meath, who enjoyed an unusually long reign of 15 years. Okay. Yeah, and there are battle maps. Oh, here's the tonsure. The Irish tonsure was V-shaped, making it barely perceptible from the front when viewed from the top. However, the tonsure was the shape of an adze head. At a glance, observers could identify a monk as being either the Irish or the European tradition. There you go, Janet. There is Matthew Stout illustrating this is the Irish tonsure, and this is the continental. So there you go. Fascinating stuff. The Easter controversy led to the Synod of Mylene, where the churches in the south of Ireland acknowledged the orthodox method of calculating Easter. 11 churches of the recalcitrant northern part of the island received a letter from Pope John IV in 640 condemning their idiosyncrasy. And here is a map it's a map representing the Easter controversy and who was on which side. You can see the dotted line there representing the division between the sides in the argument. It's a funny thing, this, isn't it? We've talked about this in Live Irish Myths, about this constant division of Ireland. Now, it follows different lines. You know, the church line is vertical from the northwest coast of Mayo down into, Wicklow. Let Quinn and Let Moga were divided by a line running across the middle. And then we spoke about, the continental collision that happened 420 million years ago, and the Yappa to Suture, which runs from, roughly speaking, from the Shannon Estuary at Limerick up to Clogherhead in County Louth. This constant sort of idea that the island was divided, and of course in the Milesian, after the Milesians arrived, Eramon and Eberfin divided the island north and south before they fought to the death at the end of a year, and it was amalgamated into one kingdom. Chapter 5 is Ecclesiastical Law and Secular Law, 695 to 756. On the eve of the 8th century, a royal assembly established a law protecting non-combatants. Patrick was known as Adzi Head. Who was that, says Janet? Adzi Head shall come across the sea. It's in one of the myths, isn't it? No, I'm not so sure. Alina Johnson says, so sorry it was late. What book is this? Don't worry about being late. You're very welcome. It is, I've taken the dust jacket off. It is early medieval Ireland, 431 to 1169, and it's by Matthew Stout. And that's the book that we're dealing with tonight. The assembly was overseen by the Ceannail Conal High King and Adamnan, his ally from the monastery of Iona. The list of the guarantors of the Legum Innocentium represents a who's who of Ireland and reflects the relative status of provincial and intra-provincial kings and the key ecclesiastical sites in Ireland at the time. The first half of the 8th century was notable for the compilation of ecclesiastical law, breaches of which were punished according to a long-established list of penances. Details within this compilation and the archaeology of ecclesiastical enclosures inform us about the realities of the early Irish church. Wooden churches of awesome height were detailed in the sources, and ecclesiastical wealth and sophistication are further demonstrated by the Ardagh chalice. That is the one that is pictured on the cover of Matthew's book. That's the Ardagh chalice. I've seen it in person in the National Museum in Dublin. Donna Jean Porter says she's listening. Thank you for the distraction. I'm trying to keep TV off. Completely understand. And the Derry na Flan pattern. Inspired by the compilation, and my nose is itchy, I apologize. I will sanitize my hands when I'm finished. Inspired by the compilation of canon law, secular legal scholars committed vernacular law to writing before 750. These law tracts describe contemporary society with remarkable detail and accuracy, which is another reason why the so-called Brehon laws, or they're more commonly referred to in scholarly circles as the law tracts, why they're so important, because they're historical documents and they give us such a keen insight into this period of history. And bear in mind, remember this, that there is nowhere in Europe and perhaps nowhere in the world that has a comprehensive collection of law tracts such as is found in Irish manuscripts. These law tracts describe contemporary society with remarkable detail and accuracy. Ceannail Conal dominance proved short-lived. By the mid-century, Eid Alon of the Ceannail Nogan controlled the northwest and had expanded the remit of the northern Enail southwards to Dundalk Bay. When Eid was killed in battle, he was succeeded by a king of the Clan Coleman in central Meath. For 3 centuries, until 1002, the High Kingship alternated between Ceannail Nogan and Clan Coleman kings. And of course, they are the ones associated with the northern Enail, and then the Clan Coleman are in the centre of the island, sort of controlling that area, which might have included Ishnock. And so, as would be expected of a book dealing with early medieval Ireland, there's a lot of church history in there as well. There's a page about the Tara Brooch. You'll have undoubtedly encountered this if you've even the remotest interest in Irish history. Most history books have a picture of it. Almost all Irish history books have a picture of it. I have a very interesting theory about the Tara Brooch, which you're welcome to read when we finish. There are 2 different accounts of where it was found. Now, they're not far away from each other. these places where it was allegedly found. I have a theory as to what might have happened to it. Anyway, there's one for you to read later when the episode is finished. I'll paste it in as a comment under the YouTube video and indeed under the Facebook video. I think somebody may have shared the live stream to the Mythical Ireland community. So Carl Beacon says, unbelievable amount of old lore and archaeology around there. I'm reading Anthony's Ancient Astronomers book. He does some study and research, passionate about old astronomy. Yeah, and the thing about Island of the Setting Sun is, despite the fact that it's quite a comprehensive book, we had difficulty fitting everything in. And in fact, Mythical Ireland, the book published in 2017, is really a continuation. If you could put the two of them into one book, you'd have a hell of a compilation. So just to give you another example of the brilliant work of Stout in terms of trying to locate, visually for us, here are the places mentioned in the triads of Ireland in one map. And you can just see how much work went into this. Look, I'll zoom in and just show you if you can. I'm not sure if it'll focus properly, but the detail is simply breathtaking. It's fantastic. And so onwards to the Golden Age, Chapter 6, the Golden Age and its end. And they're the years 756 to 808. And again, as with all of the previous chapters, all of the important places mentioned in the coming chapter are given in a full-page map right at the beginning of the chapter. Brilliant. From the middle of the 8th century, an equilibrium was achieved in the territory of the southern Inale, where the Clan Coleman remained to the fore, and in the territory of the northern Inale, where the Kenale Nogan continued to dominate. But Irish political entities remained minute and constantly in turmoil. Very important point. Most of the provincial kings ruled small provinces and were eternally at war with their neighbours, especially when compared to the contemporary European kingdom ruled by Charlemagne. In Mumu, that is the Old Irish name for Munster, M-U-M-U, internecine warfare ensured that the provincial kingship alternated between rival dynasties. Churchmen took part in battles, and the great monastic sites waged war against each other in the Midlands. I mentioned this, and I think I quoted that exact line in my very long read blog post about scribes and kings, religion and politics in early medieval Ireland. And again, if you haven't encountered that or you haven't had a chance to read it, I'll paste it as a link there as a comment underneath the video. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. That's a 4,000 word blog, a long read blog post, as we say. As churchmen became ever more embroiled in secular matters, so too did kings become more closely linked to the church through the royal sponsorship of new laws and at times through ordination. And there's something I want to say about that. And that is, I was at Malafont Abbey and with a group, and this is a couple of years ago, and I did not know this. I have been there since I was a child. Malafont Abbey was excavated sometime in the middle of the 20th century, perhaps the 1950s, 40s or 50s, I'm not sure. But in the church, which is the largest of the buildings, or the remains of the church, it's only the low walls that remain of it and the bases of pillars. There are all these sites marked with concrete slabs, which marked burial places. And I had always assumed, quite naively, of course, because perhaps I wasn't as attentive in school in relation to medieval history. I didn't actually have much interest in it until recent years, to be quite honest with you. But I'm catching up big time now. And that is the fact that I said to the guide, I said, presumably this is where all the chief abbots were buried. She says, oh, no. No. The churchmen were all buried outside the church grounds. And I said, well, who's buried under the ground of the church? And she said, all the patrons and sponsors, some of whom were secular. Apparently, it was a king. What's his name? Diarmid O'Carroll, who granted the Cistercians the huge amount of lands that they were given in the area. But it was an aspect that intrigued me, surprised me, mystified me. And I'm slowly getting to grips with the reasons for that. You might have expected, as you sometimes see in modern cathedrals, you see these slabs built into the floor of the church, and you see that such an archbishop or a cardinal is buried under there. But the natural assumption for innocent me, naive me, was to think that the churchmen were buried, the chief abbots, etc., the abbots and the chief monks, and maybe some of the scribes. Not at all. They were all buried outside the church. The ones who gave the money got buried in the special place. And that, folks, is how religion and politics continue to be tied together into the modern era. And we are not going down that rabbit hole tonight. The mingling of church and state is also seen in the writing of secular tales within monasteries. And this is one of the key reasons that if you want to really study Irish mythology, you cannot ignore medieval history. The Táin Cuailnge, Ireland's Iliad, originates from this time, perhaps as a reaction to the secularization of the church. A more ascetic order emerged known as the Céilí Day. At Iona, as the 8th century closed, the great achievement of Irish art was realized with the creation of the Book of Kells. Confident early medieval Irish society faced a sudden, sharp shock when the Vikings launched their raids on Irish coastal monasteries in 795. Within a decade, the community of Iona had sought refuge at a new, safer inland monastery at Kells in County Meath. So here is a very interesting graphic. I'm going to show it to you, but represented here are the burning of churches, internecine warfare, and the promulgation of laws between 600 AD and 1000 AD. And look at the spike. Look where the spike occurs. It occurs towards the end of the 8th century and the beginning of the 9th. There's a massive spike in activity there, and there's a reason for that, which I hope we get a chance to go into now. Fantastic stuff. Anyway, there's lots and lots and lots to read, and we're not going to read a lot of it tonight. There's a section about the Book of Kells as well. And then we get on to chapter 7, which is called Kings and Vikings. And again, a map showing you all the places mentioned in the chapter. Patricia Healy-Sullivan says, I had no idea you were on today. Love to tour from rainy Vermont. Yeah, I did, and I'm trying to do this with the book talk. I'm trying to do what I do at Live Irish Myths, which is to flag it up earlier in the day. And so I set up, I announce it on Facebook, on the Mythical Ireland main page and on the Mythical Ireland community. And also I set up the live stream on YouTube. So if you're subscribed to YouTube, you should get a notification. Sometime earlier in the day, you should get a notification. Mythical Ireland will be live tonight at 8 p.m. or whatever. But anyway, Facebook, unfortunately, is a little bit hit and miss in how it disseminates the posts around to the people who follow pages. Vicious Viking attacks continued throughout the first half of the 9th century and initiated a dedicated slave trade in Ireland. Other aspects of early medieval society also began to change. Most decisive was a shift towards arable farming and a more diverse livestock economy. The Cenéil Nógan extended the power of kingship in general by imposing their choice of rulers over the subservient province of Lyon. In Mumu, the early 9th century was dominated by the violent career of Fedelmid mac Crimthon. Although a member of the ascetic Céilí Day, he burnt churches and raided throughout Ireland. I think it's probably pronounced Fedelmid, probably an early version of Phelim. Fedelmid's church of Derrynaflan possessed the richest set of altarware ever recovered from an Irish ecclesiastical site. In 837, the Vikings began to stay in Ireland permanently. They founded 2 fortified ship harbours in 841, strategically placed to spearhead an unsuccessful attempt to conquer Meath. The Irish reaction to the permanent Viking presence was a shift in behaviour. For example, internecine warfare was replaced by assassination. The first effective High King in post-Viking Ireland was Máel Sechnaill. I hope you're paying attention, Paul Gowan. Why are we interested in Máel Sechnaill? Máel Sechnaill mac Máel Runny. He defeated the Vikings and may have been responsible for the erection of the first high crosses of Ireland. Stone carving became the central focus. Sorry, I just realised I'm talking about the wrong Máel Sechnaill. The later Máel Sechnaill of around 1000 AD was the one who, of course, destroyed the Lia Alve, the largest standing stone in the province. Stone carving became the central focus of Irish ecclesiastical artists from this point. Erigena, Ireland's greatest philosopher, was active in the Carolingian Empire at mid-century. He embodied the zenith of Irish intellectual activity in Europe. I will draw your attention to two Viking settlements, one at Woodstown I think it's in County Waterford, where extensive excavation has happened in recent years, and also at Lindochel, which is at Annagassan in County Louth, a mere 10 miles northeast of me here, a little bit northeast of me here in Drogheda. And this hasn't been excavated, but when it is, I think it will reveal a lot of great excitement. And so one of the things that we find in this later chapter is we have the map at the beginning, but we also have full-page maps chronicling well, in this case, the first generation of Viking raids. And of course, there will be a lot more of those. Very interesting graphic there about the construction dates of mills in Ireland. And you'll see there's a huge concentration of them between the 7th century and the 12th century AD. The Fear of Tolucia is mentioned. Violence in the annals, yes. Second generation of Viking raids. Now, again, hats off to Matthew Stout for being able to graphically represent all of this massive tangled information. It's like a web, and he disentangles it very, very well for us. This is the second generation of Viking raids, and it is a busy, busy scene, as you can see, 837 to 873. And there's a map of Lindochel. As I say, it hasn't been excavated, but a lot of the archaeology is visible, and there's probably been a certain amount of geophysics. There's a Muradoch's Cross at Monaster Boyce, just a few miles out the road from me here. Probably, well, what is widely accepted as the finest example of an Irish high cross. It's an impressive map, Caitlin, isn't it? I wonder, do you know Matthew Stout? His reputation precedes him. Viking towns and rural change, 870 to 976, and that is again the next chapter. Towards the end of the 9th century, the kings of the Northern Inale made noteworthy gains against the Vikings through concerted attacks on their northern strongholds. The Vikings, meanwhile, were preoccupied with attacks in Scotland, England, and northern France. Burr Whelan is in the house. Hello, Burr. This explains a 40-year hiatus virtually free of Viking terror, 873 to 913, and Flann Sinna's expulsion of the Vikings from Dublin in 902. Flann Sinna, Clan Coleman, king of Tara, was also a patron of Clonmacnoise. He financed the construction of Ireland's earliest documented stone church. Round towers, those most iconic of Irish stone buildings, are first mentioned in the year 950. While ecclesiastical sites were being reimagined in stone, ring forts were increasingly abandoned. Fewer but more impressive raised ring forts were constructed from early in the 10th century. Exclusive elites with changing economic foundations suggest that Ireland was edging towards a more feudal society. Viking towns were the key drivers of this social change. From 913, a long generation of Viking attacks recommenced, accompanied by a new phase of town building. Dublin, Waterford, and Limerick have their origins in this renewal of Viking activity. The excavations in Dublin, particularly along Fishamble Street, unveiled every conceivable aspect of town life during the years 930 to 1040. From the middle of the 10th century, traditional Mumu kingship faltered. The Oanacht or Oganacht, long dominant in the province, were challenged for supremacy by the hitherto unknown Dáil Cosh, and they are from what is in modern County Clare, a very small kingdom. And of course, you know who emerges from the Dáil Cosh to become one of the greatest figures of Irish history. Viking Raids 874 to 912, the 40 Years' Rest, is another full-page map. Brilliant. Barbara King has to leave early, but has ordered the book while watching. Brilliant stuff. Using a gift card I received for my birthday. Brilliant, great birthday present. I don't know Stout personally, but I'm familiar with a beer of the same name, says Caitlin. I'm sure he hasn't heard that joke before. Viking Raids 913 to 50 is the 4th generation. Again, a very complex scenario. Brilliant work. Anyway, we need to move on because it is an hour and 10 minutes. Round Towers, there's a little panel there explaining Round Towers. A Generation of Giants, 976 to 1022 is chapter 9, and again, as usual, accompanied by a map. This half century was dominated by the exploits of two extraordinary Irish kings, Brian Borava, or Brian Boru, and Miles Shechnel. This is the Miles Shechnel we were talking about, Paul Garron, Clan Coleman, king of Media. Brian came to power by harnessing the strategic and economic significance of Viking towns. He built fortifications and maintained a mastery over the church throughout his career. He captured the kingship of Mumu in 978 and took the hostages of Lyon and Osria in 983. Miles Shechnel had more traditional ruler origins for a ruler of Media, but he too was an innovator. He imposed a tax on Viking Dublin and a levy on every fortification in his kingdom, and used stewards to manage his estates and collect rents. In Connacht, kingship in Ireland took a further modernising step when the O'Brien became the O'Concovar, or the O'Connors, and the kingship of that province passed from father to eldest son, a practice that continued across 7 generations. The principle of primogeniture did not become widespread, however. Brian became the acknowledged over-king of Connacht and Media in 1002. Uli submitted in 1005, and Cenéil Nógam in 1010. And finally, in the year 1011, at the age of 70, Brian defeated the Cenéil Conal to become the first High King to have authority over all of Ireland. This sovereignty quickly unravelled, and the disastrous conflict in Clontarf in 1014 put an end to Brian's life and his high kingship. Afterwards, the struggle for power over Mumu resumed. Miles Shechnel retained the Clan Coleman kingship until his death in 1022. And so the campaigns of the O'Briens and Miles Shechnel and other forces are mapped again in one of these superb full-page maps. I'm going to move quickly on. There are more campaign maps, actually several more. Brilliantly done. One of the most important facts of that period, the Brian Boru period, and you know, the culmination of all the battles between the Vikings and the Irish and the Vikings and the Vikings with the Irish against the Vikings and other Irish, if you follow, is that there is no surviving manuscript from 10th century, from the 900s. And that is precisely because the Vikings were burning and pillaging, robbing all the sacred books, which were considered treasures. And Ireland was a country that was divided into many small kingdoms and provinces. And there was bloody mayhem, basically. And one of the upshots of that is that we have no surviving documents, mythological tracts, as it were, from the monasteries of that period. Chapter 10 is vernacular literature and contacts from abroad, 1022 to 86. Media was never again a substantial power in its own right, but Mumu fared better despite the great power vacuum created by the death of Brian Boru. The Oanacht made ineffectual efforts to reclaim the kingship of Mumu until Brian's son, Donnacha MacBrian, emerged as the most powerful leader. Donogh exercised authority over the south of Ireland from 1026, but he made no inroads into the territory of the northern Inale. The Ikinsula Overking, and that's the O'Kinsellas, Diarmid MacMail na Mo, achieved the unusual distinction of becoming ruler of Lion and Viking Dublin. Diarmid supported King Harold of England and his sons in their futile wars in England, an early internationalization of Irish kingship. The 11th century is notable too for the flowering of prose writing in Irish, including the influential history of Brian Boru, which is Cogul Gael Rí Gaillimh, which is basically an account of the wars between the Irish and the foreigners, or the Vikings. I think did we have a complete episode about that, or was it that it was mentioned in one episode of Live Irish Myths? I can't exactly remember, but we certainly gave it a mention. Tardalbach O'Brien emerged from exile and obscurity to defeat Donogh, his uncle, for the kingship of Mumu in 1058. After Diarmid MacMail na Mo's death in 1072, Tardalbach became the foremost ruler in Ireland. In that capacity, Archbishop Lanfranc of Canterbury urged him to sponsor a program of ecclesiastical reform. Pope Gregory VII wrote to the Mumu king in 1084, also urging reform. Tardalbach's Council of Dublin in 1085 represents the first reforming synod. And of course, we know, as mentioned at the outset, there were more of those later, most noticeably the Synod of Kells and Malafont in 1148. His death a year later ensured that the business of reform passed to the next generation. Okay. Destruction of Dardaraga's hostel, not difficult. That was written in that period. And chapter 11 is Church Reform and the Rise of the West, 1086 to 1138. Morchertach O'Brien, Tardalbach's heir to the kingdom of Mumu, could not assert authority over the entire island, while Donald MacLachlan, king of the Cenail Nogan, was waging war against the Uli, and they're in the north, Uli being sort of an early name for Ulster, or at least part of the province of Ulster. However, Morchertach established control over Connacht through the expulsion of the ruling family from the province, a novelty in the power of overkings. Morchertach also continued his father's program of ecclesiastical modernization. In 1095, the Mumu king received his first communication from Archbishop Anselm urging reform. A synod was held in Waterford, a well-defended and wealthy town, in 1096. The Synod of Cashel was held 5 years later. Morchertach gave Cashel to the Irish Church at this gathering, thereby depriving the Ogan of Cashel of their ancient royal seat. It was basically given away to the Church. After Cashel, Morchertach led the armies of Southern Ireland into a disastrous confrontation with the Northern Inale. Despite this defeat, Morchertach presided over the Synod of Rothbresel in 1111, where a diocesan framework was established. When Morchertach and Donald died, Tardalbach O'Connor came to the fore, marking the unprecedented rise of a Connacht king to all Ireland dominance. And we still have that today when the Tipperary and Cork hurlers win the hurling All-Ireland. O'Connor, the foremost military strategist of all the pre-Norman Irish kings, controlled Lion and Dublin by 1127. Mumu, under the leadership of Cormac McCarthy, resisted attacks from Connacht. Cormac endorsed church reform through his support of Malachy, the key individual behind changes to the 12th century Irish Church. And of course, Malachy was the one who founded Malafont Abbey and brought the Cistercians to Ireland. Yet again, another map, and yet again, another table of names and places mentioned in the chapter, brilliantly put together by Matthew Stout. We're nearly there. The diocese, that's an important one, determined at the Synod of Rothbresel in 1111. And they're the basis of, like, a number of those dioceses remain to this day. The diocese of Clogher, Clonard, Clonfert, Ferns, Wexford, Cashel, Lismore, Waterford, etc., etc. So the Rothbresel was the one that divided the country into dioceses, and I think then Kells, the Synod of Kells Malafont was the one that increased the number of archdioceses and archbishops. The coming of the Normans, and that's the last section. Actually, it isn't really, but it nearly is. To the coming of the Normans, 1138 to 67. Tardalbach O'Connor asserted his authority over most of Ireland after the death of his Mumu rival. He then formed a variety of alliances with and against 3 Irish kings who remained in power up to the Norman invasion. Tiernan O'Rourke, Diarmid MacMurchada, that's, by the way, MacMurchada is a version of the name Murphy, and Donogha O'Carroll. Donogha O'Carroll is the one who gave the land to the Cistercians previously mentioned. Donogha was a supporter of Malachy, who continued his program of church reform into the 1140s. Exactly. Malachy travelled to Rome to gain the Pope's sanction for the archdiocese established at Rathbrassel, but he was sent back to Ireland to undertake further negotiations. A synod in 1148 repartitioned the island into four archdioceses, an enduring accommodation that gained papal sanction at the Synod of Kells Malafont in 1152. I do apologise, I was wrong. I've been giving the date of the Synod of Kells Malafont as 1148. It's actually 1152. During this process, Malachy became a devotee of Bernard of Clairvaux and the Cistercian way of life. He instigated the foundation of Malafont Abbey, Ireland's first continental-style monastery. Tardalbach O'Connor's power waned as he aged. Even before his death in 1156, Morchertach MacLachlan, king of the Northern Inale, was the new High King. Unbeknownst to Irish contenders for power, the new King of England was also cultivating an appetite for Irish affairs. Morchertach reigned for a decade until his former supporters turned against him and he was killed. Nasty stuff. Rory O'Connor then restored the High Kingship to Connacht. A complex sequence of short-lived alliances followed, eventually resulting in Diarmid MacMurchada's expulsion from Ireland. And of course, he came back, didn't he? And he brought with him the Normans, and the rest, as they say, is history. Again, lots of lovely maps. Pre-Norman monasteries. A map of pre-Norman monasteries. That's an interesting one as well. Thank you, Matthew, for your very, very devoted work. There's Malafont Abbey from the air, and you'll see here's the remains of the cruciform church, and here's the lavabo, which is probably one of the finest surviving portions of the old monastery. Anyway, you may not be able to see them, but in here, can't really see them, but there are a lot of slabs there. These are the slabs that I was talking about, the grave slabs representing the burial place of not the churchmen, but the ones, the patrons, the ones, the supporters of the church, the financial supporters of the church. And chapter 13, which is the last of the chapters, is the end of early medieval Ireland, 1167 to 1189. When Diarmid MacMurchada was exiled from Ireland, he turned to Henry II for assistance. Long an ally of the English king, MacMurchada swore allegiance to Henry and received permission to solicit Norman help to restore his kingdom. Richard de Clare, Earl of Pembroke, agreed to undertake this task in return for marriage to Diarmid's daughter and succession rights. Diarmid seriously not see something wrong with this. This is one of these key turning points in history when an Irish king goes abroad and asks for Norman help in England, and basically gives his daughter and the promise of succession. Like, how did he think it was going to end up? Was he planning to kill Strongbow or declare as his proper name? Diarmid returned to Ireland in 1167 with a small number of Norman knights. Meanwhile, Rory O'Connor, King of Connacht, attempted to make real his claims to high kingship. The Kenale Conal, Osria Mumu, and the Kenale Nogan all had submitted to him by 1168. The following year, the first substantial Norman force landed at Bannow Bay. Richard de Clare arrived soon afterwards. That's de Clare, D-E-C-L-A-R-E, swelling this invasion force to 2,000 men. Wexford, Waterford, and Dublin were all quickly captured. King Henry II himself arrived at the end of 1171, at which point the invasion force exceeded 7,000 men. So it began with a few Norman knights, and suddenly it has expanded to the force of 7,000 men. Henry became Lord of Ireland and began the process of conquest and subinfeudation that would secure political and economic allegiance to the English throne. The Normans created manors that were closely linked to the parish system first proposed in 1111. Gerald of Wales was one of the Normans who came to Ireland. Giraldus Cambrensis, this very famous Norman historian or propagandist. His writings provide a vivid, if controversial, depiction of the country. He confirmed the primacy of the pastoral economy, along with the continuing conservatism in ecclesiastical and political administration, and thus ends what is a fabulous exploration of a very, very complex period and a very, very well documented period of Irish history. And I think that is one of the reasons, as stated at the outset, I think that was in Stout's preface, one of the reasons that Irish medieval history is studied not just so devoutly in Ireland, but in Europe and around the world, is because, first of all, it's with this huge documentation of events in church records, manuscripts created in the monasteries, but also because of its influence on European affairs. This appears from the outside to be a sort of a set of parochial skirmishes, all the time, Irish kings vying for larger territory and vying for control of outlying provinces. And one might sort of get the impression that, well, it's just the Irish, stabbing each other with spears and trying to stab each other's eyes out and such nastiness. But in fact, there's a much greater picture develops, and that is the fact that during the Middle Ages, during the Dark Ages in Europe, as I said, when learning and books seem to have fallen out of favour, it was the Irish monasteries that preserved this great love of learning and writing, reading, recitation mostly, not so much of the reading. And this was the period in which many of the Irish mythological tracts were actually committed to vellum. They were written down, the likes of Toynbee Cúilge, the likes of Laura Cowalla, the likes of Cogugale Rigaliv, the likes of the stories of the Tua, the Danann, etc., etc. And so we're very glad for that, because without that period of history, as bloody and as complex as it is equally fascinating. We are bequeathed, as a result of that, an incredible gift, and that is the gift of learning and lore, and all of those hundreds of manuscripts, thousands, tens of thousands of pages of vellum, which are now housed in various universities and libraries in Ireland and in Britain and in parts of Europe, which give us not just an insight into the stories that we have been recounting in Live Irish Myths over the past 124 episodes, but also, as Matthew Stout has so brilliantly elucidated, an insight into the very complex history of Ireland, from the time of the arrival of Christianity on this island to the time of the arrival of the Normans. Admittedly, a period of history that, until about 3 or 4 years ago, I knew very little about, and one that I've been studying a lot more, and quite a lot of the books. Well, not quite a lot, but there's a lot more books about medieval Ireland on the Mythical Ireland library bookshelves now than there were, say, 4 or 5 years ago, I'm glad to say. So I hope that has given you an insight. Matthew's book is published by Wordwell. Not sure how much it costs, but sure, we can find that out fairly quickly. Well, we can if we type properly. If there are any questions, please let me have them. I want to give a quick shout out to Mythical Ireland patrons, as I have neglected to do in the last couple of episodes. Thank you very much for your support. If you want to become a patron, head over to patreon.com/Mythical Ireland. A lot of what happens on Mythical Ireland is made possible by the generous support of patrons. You also get rewarded for your patronage. Let me have a look on Amazon.uk is £35 sterling hardcover. So, but look, It's absolutely worth the investment. I mean, even if you weren't the sort of person that read this kind of thing from cover to cover, I did, and I was thoroughly intrigued. It is a great reference book, and because Robin Rickman says I found it for $36.80, which is quite good. Yeah, £35 translates into about $45 or $50, probably about $50. So $36.80 is very good. It's not just the fact that it is the chronological aspect of it. It's also the fact that it is so visual. At all times, you get these wonderful visual aids to help you disentangle what, as I have repeatedly said, is a complex web of history and political and church intrigue. So let me just check that there are any questions on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. It's an hour and a half now, so I appreciate that a lot of people have hung around, which is great. Obviously, you're not bored. Iona McCall says a great example of the Round Tower is at Donoughmore Lane, just outside the town of Navan on the Navan-Slane Road. One I'm very familiar with, Iona. Absolutely a beautiful sample. Yes. And of course, Glendalough, you can't get as a setting for a monastery. I haven't been to Iona, by the way, so I can't compare it with Iona. But in terms of on the island of Ireland, I don't think you can get much better. I believe Glen Columkill as a sacred landscape is also beautiful. Clonmacnoise, by virtue of the fact that it's on the banks of the Shannon, is beautiful as well, with the Escariada running close by, but it doesn't have that dramatic landscape of Glendalough. Just checking for more questions. No, I don't think so. When was it published? Carmel wants to know. It was 2017 by Wordwell. I'm not sure if it's Wordwell Books or Wordwell Press or whether it's just Wordwell. We'll find out presently for you. These things are important because when you're trying to track down a copy for yourself, it's important that you know the details, isn't it? Can't find it now, of course. Just when I go looking for it, I can't find it. Yeah, I still can't find it. I'm pretty sure it's 2017. Oh, here it is. Yeah, published by Wordwell Limited, Matthew Stout, 2017. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Yeah, and that was another thing that we encountered in our episodes dealing with the annals, was that a lot of the annal entries dealt with the affairs of church and politics and weather, and hardly anything outside of that, mentions of plagues and diseases and all the rest. But it was mostly to do with the accession of church figures and kings and wars, and then, of course, the plagues and astronomical events like eclipses and the appearance of comets, etc., etc. Fascinating stuff. Yeah, as Darren is saying, at $36, just check that there aren't pages missing. Okay. Devonish has a great round tower too, says Janet. I actually haven't been to Devonish, to my shame. When all of this pandemic is over, I tell you, I intend to do a lot of traveling around Ireland and a lot of live streams and making videos and photography and writing blog posts. That's my hope anyway. And that would be made all the more possible if you become a patron. Thanks indeed for watching, folks, tonight. It's been my great pleasure to present what is hopefully going to be a series that will run, well, it is running in parallel with Live Irish Myths. I'm hoping that we don't cross over too much, that we don't rob material or borrow material from Live Irish Myths too much, and that we can keep the two separate. There are certainly hundreds of books here that we can talk about in this series. Have you ever done a library shelf tour of everything behind you, says Elena. I did two before the refurbishment was done, and I never sort of did another one, so that's something I have to come back to, is to talk about all the books. But you're getting them one by one, episode by episode now, you know. So hopefully a few copies of Matthew Stout's book will be acquired tonight. We will, in future episodes, deal with more of the books pertaining to medieval Ireland. Of course we will. But this one stands out because partly because I know the author, but partly because of this brilliance in capturing this age so graphically and so visually for us. Anyway, in the meantime, Live Irish Myths will resume next Monday evening, but conscious as I am of the long gap between episodes, I will probably do some further broadcast. We might do another episode of Book Talk between now and Monday, or I might do an impromptu live stream from somewhere out in the landscape. I won't keep you hanging on too long. If it's impromptu, it won't be announced beforehand. If it's Book Talk, like at Live Irish Myths, it will be generally announced before noon on the day of broadcast, so you should get at least 8 hours notice of it. And I'm conscious of the fact that some people are saying they're not getting that notice on Facebook. There are 59,000 likes on the Mythical Ireland Facebook page, and there are 9,600 followers on the Mythical Ireland community. And when I post a post, it seems to only reach a certain portion of people, unfortunately. You can change that. If you're following the Mythical Ireland page on Facebook, there is a setting you can go into, and perhaps we can discuss this in a post later on the page. You can go into See All, because apparently the default setting is to only see highlights of what the page posts. So if you really like the page and you want to see everything that's posted, you can actually select See All. I have done that with all my favorite Facebook pages. Perhaps you want to do it too. In the meantime, if you're on Mythical Ireland, the Mythical Ireland page right now watching the live stream, and you're not a member of the Mythical Ireland community, which is a wonderful gathering of people from around the world, head on over there now. I'll paste in the link just in case you're not a member of that. Also, if you're on Facebook, don't forget to subscribe to the Mythical Ireland YouTube channel, because there will be video content on there that might not be viewed on Facebook. I generally share the YouTube links onto Facebook, but as I said, Facebook doesn't always disseminate or share those links out among all of the people who are in that page. So perhaps just to keep an eye on everything, go along to youtube.com/Mythical Ireland and subscribe to the channel. As always, it's been my great pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed that. I think you have. Lots of very nice interaction tonight. And don't forget, if you have any further questions, do drop me an email. It's mythicalireland@gmail.com. And if I can find the time to answer you, I will. Can't promise that I'll answer every email every time within 24 hours, but I do my best to answer all my correspondence. In the meantime, keep washing your hands and using hand sanitizer, socially distancing, cough and sneeze etiquette into the crook of your arm. Don't forget, when you're in a supermarket or a mall or on public transport, don't forget to wear your mask. Good night. Slán go fóill, Icawa Kulasov, August. Don't forget the most important one, Tog go bugay. Take it easy. Bye bye.